G'day, this is Adrian Johnson from Men's Right Sydney. Hello. Well, recently we did a quite successful screening of The Red Pill. We had a very interesting Q&A section afterwards where people got to ask questions and even make statements and even do plugs for what they were doing. Some interesting things happened, including a PUA literally stood up and made some statements about how men should act and why they should act that way. But anyways, so we did in fact capture a video of the event, but we had some technical difficulties with the video. But thankfully, we got a audio recording device, which as you'll see is in my hand. We got Pete Nicholas to answer some questions and say how he felt things were for fathers' rights in Australia and abroad. I brought him along because fathers' issues is something that I'm not entirely knowledgeable on. So I was happy to have somebody from Dads in Distress there to answer questions when my knowledge was lacking. We also had very interesting people showing up that I did not expect would show up. People like Jasmine Newman, who you'll see in the photo. So, I'm aware you'll probably listen to this in the background while doing something else, and please do so, but enjoy the Q&A section for what it is. Just FYI, there is going to be some areas where the audio is a bit iffy given how far the recording device is from various people asking their questions and making statements, but for the most part, it's pretty damn good. Enjoy, guys. Okay, so I'll just like you to maybe outline just a bit of what it's like for fathers in Australia. How similar is it to how it's been portrayed in this movie? Like I said, American-centric, not specifically Australian. So.
Probably worth saying a few words of introduction then. My name is Pete Nichols. I know that there's people in here that can attend the groups that I've run in the past in Sydney. So today I facilitate groups for a group called Dads in Distress, actually also for Mums in Distress. And these are people who are struggling post-separation to get access to their children. Now, as you can probably tell from my dodgy accent, I wasn't actually born here, for which I apologise, but I found home in the end. But I went through this myself in the UK, and for 11 years I was actually prevented from seeing my own child, regardless of the fact that I'd actually brought her up from the age of 0 to 5, and then from 5 she was disappeared with the mother, and it took me 11 years to be reunited properly. And I won sole custody at the end of that period, but I was compelled to leave the country after that because I got involved in activism. So I was probably one of the guys out there protesting in the UK. Got involved with some groups in the States as well, so I can tell you that certainly in the UK and in the States it's a very similar situation. It is almost identical, despite the fact the laws are subtly different. The situation is pretty much the same. And when I came to Australia 4.5 years ago and started getting involved in Dads in Distress here, discovered it was identical yet again. And so in 2015, together with a few people, we got invited to the Senate, and the intent was that under Australian law, you're not able to talk about your experience of what happens in the family court. People do talk about it, but technically it's illegal. And because of that, I was invited along because I could speak about my personal situation, trying to get access to my own daughter. And at the end of it, I could say to the senators, oh, and by the way, it's identical in Australia. So it was one of the ways of getting the senators to actually understand what was going on. But that's a quick introduction to who I am, what I do. We run groups, about 20 or so around the country, and the intent behind the groups is to prevent the very high level of suicide. Now, you hear different proportions. Sorry, there was a question there, go on.
Yeah, I've heard a report that more than 100 men and fathers commit suicide a year in Australia. Is that correct?
Like a month.
They do. Well,
I don't know, man. I'm asking it. I'm not sure. I'm asking the question.
it's a really good question, actually.
Obviously, he knows more than I do. That's why I'm asking it.
No,
I
I'm
don't
just
know.
saying.
I'm asking. If I knew, I wouldn't ask the question.
Boy, I'm going to try not to upset you, Martin. Okay, Look, I mean, there are different opinions from different groups. Okay, I have been doing a tour around Australia to get it's called Stop Male Suicide, where we've been talking to different academics, different experts, people that work in the field, and it's very difficult to get an accurate number. And the best number we can get is that around 25% of male suicides in Queensland are related to a post-separation situation.
Well, I know the case of a fellow that couldn't see his kids. I know him personally. He committed suicide in Watson's Bay in the Gap. I know him personally. I mean, I didn't see him jump,
it's very sad.
but I know him personally.
I mean, I guess in 15 years or so working the field, I'd say there's probably two that I know personally. It is relatively common. It's a common cause of suicide to not have access to kids. I mean, certainly one of the bits of research that we conducted last year was we went out to about 6,000 dads around Australia who had gone through a separation, and we had 400 responses. From a statistical perspective, it's pretty accurate. There's a few bits and pieces that came out of that which were quite stunning. One of them is that 4% reported that their children had tried to commit suicide because they couldn't get access to their fathers. Now that's something that's never been heard before. It's a very uncomfortable statistic. So whether you are supportive of men or not, it's very difficult to ignore that there are a group of children who will try and commit suicide. We had one actually only 6 months ago. I think, my apologies, I'll get to it in a second. But there was one in, I believe it was in Queensland, where an 8-year-old boy who was prevented from seeing his father was sitting with his mother and his sister watching television. And some of you guys may know the story better than I, because I've only heard it secondhand. But he just got up while they were watching television. He went into the kitchen, and mother thought it was for a drink. He didn't come back after a while. He was called. When the mother went into the kitchen, he had taken his belt off, wrapped it around his neck, wrapped it around the fridge door, and hung himself. He wanted to see his dad.
Was that written down? Like, can we prove that?
Yeah, I think it was in the public domain. But the media tend not to cover these stories because it's
the media
uncomfortable.
Don't report also the whole suicide in Australia. I live next to the Gap, and every week 5 to 6 people commit suicide, but nobody mentioned it. I met a cop about 8 months ago, and I said to him, "Why don't you report this?" He said they don't want copycats because it's bad enough already as it is. Yeah. And guess how much? What's the percentage? Men and women, 80 to 20.
Actually, that wouldn't surprise me. That wouldn't surprise. I mean, if you look at the academic research into male suicide, it'll give you a whole range of causes, from alcoholism to drugs to loss of income. It'll give you a whole range of things. Loss of standing in society. But if you look at a typical, not always, but a typical separation where you might have lost everything. You've lost your home. You're so stressed. You've lost your ability to work. You've lost access to your children. If you think about it, all of those kind of typical causes actually, come together in that kind of environment, which is why we believe it's one of the major causes of male suicide. And when I say 25%, it's nobody actually knows, because one of the problems we have across the Western world, including Australia, is nobody keeps accurate records. So when there's a post-mortem, why someone died, they'll say, well, he hung himself. They won't say he hung himself because. So it's very hard to actually get that data. Now, Queensland is the only state that did that for a while. So if we were to extrapolate, if we assume that what was measured in Queensland is true of the whole country, then that would equate to around 12 a week, which is not quite. We've heard numbers being bandied about out there, about 21 a week, 21 fathers, and it's difficult to get proof. I'm not going to say that's not true. We just don't know. But the best evidence that we can find academically is around, probably equates to 12 a week.
Wow. I mean, I didn't know about the kids thing, and that's insane. Okay, go for it. Question.
You said that 4% of children, because they can see their father, is that attempted suicide or is that completed suicide?
Oh, that's a really interesting one. It was attempted, actually. It was actually not completed, and we don't know. We ran a survey, and we asked about roughly 40-odd questions. And they were kind of relatively random questions. And in my day job, I work in large-scale research, social research. And sometimes you have to ask random questions because you don't know what you're going to find until you've asked the question. And so we asked about suicide, different members of the family. And what shocked us was when people started ticking the, yes, my child has attempted suicide relating to my separation.
Amazing.
It shocked us. It really did, actually. I mean, we spoke about that in the Senate, and I won't say which, but one senator actually got up and walked out.
Question?
She didn't want to hear it.
It's not really a question. I've been following you on Facebook as well too.
Oh my God, that's scary. Me personally? Or?
But the campaign that you guys run, it's so true. There's a lot of men out there being shortchanged. I mean, I'm not a father, I've never been married, no kids and that, but I totally understand the pain that men go through in respect to that, because it's absolutely 100% on the money where men are being shortchanged because of the family law court. And just recently, I was working very closely with a lawyer who did his family law court, and he's very frustrated with the legal system in the country, where just for him, he was saying that kids are being used as utilities, really, in respect to, women sort of being more in control with that, because just to get a hearing in the court system by a magistrate. He gave me an example. He goes, this was back in May, I think it was. He can't get a hearing until March this year.
Yeah.
It's even worse now.
Just to get a hearing in the court for them to hear the case, just to start the process of going through that. And the system then is being milked so badly to the point where there's a problem in our legal system that is so outdated that needs to be addressed in such a profound way that the next generation of children, boys and girls, is going to become such a huge problem in the next 20 to 30 years. We haven't seen it.
Well, actually, just one thought on that one, just a quick one. And I don't know the accurate numbers for Australia, but I understand it's similar. But if you look at the UK and the US, 51% of all lawyers are family lawyers. 49% is every other area of law combined. Now that tells you something very interesting. There's a lot of money in it, because it's like any organism naturally moves towards the source of food, and every organism that has a source of food will get bigger and bigger and bigger. So it's not a surprise that happens. It doesn't happen by itself. And I recently learned something which I just shared with the room, which really shocked me. Was a barrister said to me, well, something burning off. And I said, sorry, what's burning off? And he said, oh, I'm sure you know what burning off is. And I said, no. What is that? And he said, oh, that's how we refer to what we do to couples to burn off all of their cash reserves, using the children as a tool to get them to fight. And then when the money's burnt off, then we actually settle the problem. And it's a well-known term. That's a well-known term.
In a coffee shop, and one representing the male and one presenting the woman, that this one will bring up this issue and this one will bring issue, so they'll be able to delay the court so they can milk them both. And literally, like you just said.
Yeah, it happens.
Oh, here we go. Adrian, you had your hand up first.
Share my experience on that. So, my experience is that I separated in 2000. There was the issue of custody, so I went along to see a solicitor and I said, okay, well, where do I stand legally? So this is 14 years after the introduction of the Sex Discrimination Act. The solicitor told me that I stood a 20% chance of retaining some custody of my own children if I could prove their mother was a drug addict, violent, or an alcoholic. And if I couldn't prove that, I needed to prepare myself to lose 85% of everything I ever worked for.
It's true. It's an adversarial system, so it's not a case of proving you're good. It's not a case of proving you're good. It's a case of proving the other person is an unfit parent, which is destructive. It's a destructive system.
Reinforce the need for the men's movement to fight this sort of thing, because that's the sort of injustice that I had in the year 2000, 16 years.
Just imagine that.
Yeah, and it's actually improved since then, and it's improved directly as a result of the men's movement. Feminists, of course, are denying us the opportunity to be treated equally in divorce and custodial circumstances. So any movement towards a more fairer system is entirely due to
Well, a couple of things to say on that one. I won't name the names because it wouldn't be appropriate, but a very highly positioned politician in the UK.
Yeah,
Some.
Ted Buchanan.
I have a bit of a relationship with David Cameron, but we won't get it. But no, it wasn't him. A very high-ranking political person. I remember meeting him as part of a protest group in the UK, and he had an off-the-record discussion with us, where he said, as long as you're not recording anything, let's have an off-the-record discussion. He said, look, I'm a general guy, I'm a fair bloke, I've got a wife, I've got a kid, everything is fine for me, and I keep hearing these stories, and it's very upsetting for me to hear, but I don't know how to fix it. And I said, well, I've got a few ideas. I explained to him, and he said, here's my problem, and I need you to understand my problem as a politician. And when you can fix my problem, I'll fix yours. So I said, what's your problem? And he opened my eyes to something I'd never understood before. He said, if you look at society as a whole, I as a politician want to change the world to be a better place. He said, whether you believe it or not, that's what I want to do. But in order for me to do that, I need to be voted in. I need to get votes. So of course we have these little focus groups and political specialist groups that go out and find out what do the public want. And he said the problem comes down to that women and men as groups vote for different things. So males will tend to vote around things like the economy and security of the country. Am I going to have a job in the next 5-10 years? What's happening to the industry that I'm working in? Whereas women will tend to focus on family-related items. Okay, things about education and what rights to support do I have if I'm abandoned by this guy that I'm married to? Okay. So what does that translate down to when we put policy together as parties? He said it translates to this. If I come out with an anti-male policy, I will not lose male votes because that's not what the men look at, but I will gain female votes. If I come out with an anti-female policy, I will not gain male votes, but I will lose female votes. So he said, essentially, it will only go in one direction. And until you can come out with how I fix that, he said, I'm stuck. And he said, that's one of the things that you guys as protesters are not getting. I'm in a position where I want to help you, but I can't. Bring me a solution and I'll help you.
All right.
So we have a fundamental problem. Sorry about that.
You had a question as well?
I just wanted to make a comment. Maybe I'll stand up.
All right. Just remember, if you stand up here, you'll be recorded.
Well, yeah, I'm scared about that. But I wanted to change the direction of the conversation. I could go into my own experience, but what I wanted to say was Australia leads the world in masculinist theory. And there's a huge number of men's groups for people who are dads in distress. They have a couple of branches. There's a huge number of men's groups around Australia.
Men sheds as well.
Men's sheds.
Yeah.
And just as a brief bit of history, the women's movement has been up into the public sphere. The men's movement has been down into the emotional sphere. And there are now many men who have emotional lucidity, and it surpasses women's emotional lucidity in general. And Naomi Wolf says if the women are going to go forward, they've got to go down like the men. Why I say that is some of the men I know lead the world in masculinist theory and the thinking and how to address patriarchy. They talk about there's multiple centres of power rather than just one. You know, the patriarchy is just like saying, well, the women in the supermarket own all the food. It's crazy, but men have to come up with another theory. And there were many sociologists that said the patriarchy is just one theory. There's multiple centres of power, which was, women control children, men control the public sphere and so forth. But there's consequences for women if they nurture children. There's consequences for men if they're at work all the time. And so one of the interesting things that I found out from a feminist is the Sydney Men's Festival is the longest running men's festival in the world. So that's something you can be proud of in Sydney, that we have led the world in this field. There's one of my friends is just... It's on in Sydney at Minto every January. It's got a website.
You never hear that in the media, do you?
No, I've never heard of it.
Most men's stuff in Australia comes out of that. All the men who've started a lot of things in Queensland come from there, and there's groups now right around Australia that meet once a year, and so there are great things happening, and men need women. When women got the right to vote, it was Julie Anthony voted. There was nothing stopping women to vote, but the Senate had a vote, And there was this 25-year-old senator had a letter in his pocket from his mother that said, should that vote come up today, I want you to vote so that women can have the right to vote. And his was the casting vote. And for women to vote, they needed men. For us to have any type of influence around children or reproduction, we need women to give it to us. We need to ask for it. And we can't do it without their support. And I think that's a crucial element to moving forward. We need to listen to each other and we need to hear each other. And I just want to say, have a look at stuff in Australia. It's exceptional. Some of the thinking and the chattering class amongst masculinist theory leads the world. My friend has just travelled through Europe, through America. He said, we lead the world in this stuff. Germaine Greer did. I think it's because of our history, where it goes back to the animosity between men and women during the first settlement. But who knows? Anyway, good luck.
Thank you.
Leading the world. Clarify the actual world is one thing, but addressing and having progression is totally different.
All right. Now we're going to go for a soapbox method, but why not?
Hi, can you hear me? It's not working.
It's not a microphone, it's a recorder.
It's a recorder. Look, my name's Johnny Fergan. The problem goes back. All these issues are great, but in real terms, we're looking back. We've got a massive problem, and I've researched this for the last 15 years. I'm not going to go to every topic I researched because we don't have the time, but one thing I will say to you is men have got a massive problem. A lot of men today do not act like men. They do not lead. They don't make decisions. And a woman will never be attracted to a man that is over-emotional and like a little boy. Now, we don't have here the time to discuss every issue, but if you look at the media, and I've been watching this carefully, and there's two men that know me here very well, the media criticize and demonizes anything to do with male. And literally, there is a massive campaign against anything that is supposedly masculine. Now, I'm not going to go now into where women have been mistreated, because the truth it is they were. Now, you can agree first wave feminism or second, but the third one is insane. No woman, whether she's 20, 30, 40, or 50, wants to go with a man that's a little boy looking for a mummy. And masculinity, a man, any man, whether it's 20 or 60, that can't decide, doesn't know when and where to say no, doesn't lead, doesn't make decisions, doesn't have accountability and responsibility, will be branded in her mind as a mangina. And no woman can be attracted to a mangina. The woman that I'm with, she knows my story. She doesn't know everything, but she knows it. And I've told her about some of these issues. And she said to me, you're right. No woman, including if I was a woman, I'd be an ugly one, can be attracted to a man that is indecisive. Now, sharing feelings is great. But the problem with a lot of men, and nobody talks about this, when men share too much feelings at the beginning, and he makes the woman, instead of a girlfriend or future wife, he makes her to be his therapist. No woman wants that. And this is the problem, where men are supposedly encouraging him to share your feelings. When, the question is, nobody asked that. When you've been together for a while, not on the first, second date. And the problem with men is, majority of men, and nobody talks about, men don't make decisions. Instead of saying, where do you want to go? Say, get dressed, let me surprise you. What's more attractive? You tell me. Isn't that more interesting? I'm not going to comment. I'll rest my case. Instead of saying, where do you want to go? Meet me at XYZ. Let me surprise you. I don't know, if I was a woman, I'd be far more reluctant to go that. I don't think you can make polarizing statements. Okay. Okay, well, I'm talking about a general overview.
I did not intend it to be dating.
Okay, we're not talking about, okay, I'm talking a general overview. We're talking about a general, okay, take it specifically. The whole idea, men stop being men. And the problem is with men, yes, some things are faults of women, but also men need to take accountability and responsibility. Now, obviously the law now has gone too far away that way. It's insane, totally insane. And women have got a part also that we allowed it. The problem is, and this is one of the reasons MGTOW, Men Going Their Own, has got a massive following on YouTube. Now, to say I've never watched some of their videos, yes, I did. And if anybody knows about Sandman and Third Fingering Monkey, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's insane, mate. And a lot of people ask them questions. They put out a video. They've got 10,000 hits within 4 or 5 hours. It gives you an idea how much interest of this has come. And if you look at the statistics, and don't take my word for it, marriages in the West are declining. And divorces are rising. And when men hear other stories like mine and other men, including this fellow here, a lot of men think, shit, I don't want this to happen to me. I don't want that. Look what he went through. He lost his money, blah, blah, blah. Now, no woman, I believe, that's got sane or man goes into it thinking they're going to get ripped off or whatever. But things happen. And the problem is, majority of people don't think it'll happen to them. When you look at the statistics, more than 50%, it does happen. And that's the problem. And now it's gone the other way. On this note, I would like, with your permission, to invite you to a seminar that I'm doing on the 7th of May called How to Be a Man in Emasculated Society. You're more than welcome. I'll give you my card. If you want to come, you want to come. And if you don't want to come, that's fine too. But one thing I will tell you, it'll be a night you won't forget very quickly. Thank you very much.
All right. Well,
just say, I don't think it's a very good idea for men to be, doing what they, or using female approval as a guide for their lives. I think men should be doing what they want to do.
But one of the things is also a man has to have a purpose. When a man doesn't have a purpose, he becomes a little boy. And no woman wants to be with a little boy.
okay. Well, let's like that. All right. Now, let's change the topic completely, or you can ask questions.
Just trying to get back to the film.
Please.
The bit that I struggled with is the bit that seems to suggest there's a clash.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've been through loss of access to my child, so I can very quickly justify my hostility and lack of being dealt fairly. No, absolutely. But in watching this dispassionately, to actually see that we're framed against each other, I couldn't get it in my head because I can hear both the issues, both sides' issues, and both seem in and of themselves legitimate. But I can't find that place in myself.
Well, I think, I'd like to try and answer that if I can.
I haven't posed it yet. I can't find that place within myself where I can somehow transcend and be a bigger person to hold a place that we all can move out of that dilemma of pitting ourselves against the other for the potential of losing ground. There must be something innate, or at least programmed. It has to be one or the other.
I think I understand where you're coming from, and to a certain point, I can understand the question. You want?
I'd like to try and answer that question if I can. For me, the men's movement is about pursuing gender equality, and I fully support women's right to be treated equally with men. The problem that I come up against is people like the Sex Discrimination Commissioner denying men the opportunity to be treated equally with women. That is the quintessentially the problem.
I think the thing is that we have to all acknowledge is that many of these issues are a double-edged sword. You saw in the movie, I hate to get on a soapbox, but oh well. I saw on the movie that they talked about how women get lesser sentences, and this is true, but this is partly because women generally are just taken less seriously, and that has a double-edged sword that is both positive and negative. If you go home today, Google one word, Google neoteny. Basically what that means is that people with younger features, we take them less seriously, and women retain neotenous features for significantly longer than men do.
Yeah, I would too. I would say more compassionate.
Yes. More compassionate. But if anyone denies this, think of Margaret Thatcher for a second, and just think, do you honestly think she'd be taken anywhere near as seriously if she was a hot 29-year-old chick who looked like she was like surfing, you know? So what we should acknowledge is it's a double-edged sword. There's not this privileged thing that just massively backfires. It's something that affects men and women sometimes positively, sometimes negatively, but the key is, I believe, to fight the biases that we have, that we evolved into. And I think a lot of what you're saying comes from wanting to do that, wanting to go beyond what we've evolved from.
It's just a battle to neutralise the other person's argument, or seek a forum for your argument, and that gets I can see that's going to get absolutely nowhere.
Look, the original thing was to get feminists and MRAs to do a Q&A. That was the original thing, and it was censored. It wasn't not by me, I'll tell you. But anyway, okay, go for it.
There's so much that Jazz and I could say. But I just wanted to point out something that I thought was really interesting, and it's something that I did know, but it was really obvious from the movie. When those scenes, and I was teary quite a few times throughout the movie. Those scenes where where there's people and they're screaming and yelling, and and they're going, "Fuck you, fuck this, fuck," and I'm thinking, "Oh, I'm so ashamed to be a female right now."
Please don't.
It's young people. It's young people who they don't have life experience. They're young college graduates, or they're young. Like, I remember I got involved in Amnesty International when I was 16, and I went out there, and now I'm in my 40s, and I go, yeah, I still think Amnesty International is great, but I look at it with older eyes. And so the people that are being really in your face, screaming, "Fuck you, fuck this, fuck that," and that the politicians are listening to, oh wow, so much noise.
Well, I think.
Can you just all quiet down?
Well, I think actually to respond to that is to respond to the earlier question as well. In some respects, is a really good example of how you address intractable arguments, and that is South Africa. Okay, so for decades there's this argument of black against white, white against black, and no one can fix it until you get a psychologist from the States, a guy called, from memory, Don Beck, comes along. And he comes out with integral theory, or it's often called spiral dynamics. And the simple way to explain it is to say, well, let's recognize, if I use it in the gender sphere, let's recognize that women do have problems, which are unique to women. But let's also recognize that men have problems. And there are things that men are bad at, and that they may be perpetrators of some problems, but then so are women. And it's not until you design a new system that addresses all of those problems collectively that you can both move towards it. Because up until that point, all you're doing is going, well, I'm right, no, you're right. I'm right, no, you're right. Whatever it is. And I think what Donna was just saying is, as you're young, you're trying to make sense of the world around you. And you start to build these sets of rules up based on your life experience. And at a certain age, you get to the point where you get this kind of moral imperative that you want to make the world a better place, better than your parents did, because, my God, didn't they screw everything up for us? Right? You're angry and you want to change the world. But you have this binary thing of women against men, or black against white, or left against right. And it's not as simple as that. And as you get older, you realize actually the solutions are complex. And it's about integrating them into a new third way, which allows everyone to gravitate towards it. So I think that kind of maybe talks to...
Like, my poor sons have gotten in so much trouble at school, because they go against the feminist flow. When they say, when they say, no, actually that's not right. They're female teachers say, sit down, shut up.
Okay, Jazz.
Can I just say something to your point? And it kind of comes out of all of that, and my thinking just got stronger through everything that was said, is that instead, it kind of is a war, I've been writing on gender politics for 3 or 4 years now, and we are kind of, we're at this loggerheads. And having been attacked by feminists, I've looked very strongly, a lot like Cassie J did, I've looked very strongly into what it is that women are arguing, and I've looked very strongly into what it is that men are arguing. And I think if we could strip ego out of this, that we've got some possible solution. Now, one thing that really ticked me off last year, or maybe over the last sort of 12 to 18 months, was the Safe Schools program. And the reason that ticked me off was because what are we teaching our children? Now,
that's a very good point.
If we as parents can look at, or not as parents, but if we as adults in society, instead of being at war between the men's movement and the women's movement, if we can strip back that and say, well, what do we want for our next generation coming forward? There are elements of the Safe Schools program which are actually really good and are really sound principles. There are elements of it which are extremely frightening and very, very disturbing. But if we could stop the war up here and say, well, okay, we've got women that have got issues, we've got men that have got
Sorry,
issues.
recording.
But how are we going to fix that from the ground up? And that's what outcomes do we want for our children? And that's where I see, if we were to go and have the conversations between the men's movement and the women's movement, that's what we need to not be talking about women's rights and men's rights today, but what futures do we want for our sons and daughters? Do we want our sons? I want my son to have equal opportunities in higher education as what his sister will have. So I believe that's where those conversations need to sway.
It's hard to do it when, like I've said before, the original event that we were going to have, that Leonard over there organised, or you, clap for him, got censored, and it was originally, they were supposed to be at the end a Q&A much like this, except there were supposed to be feminists there as well to give their perspective. So the original idea for this event was much as you suggest. You have everyone have their say, and people go home saying, like what Cassie J did, maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle. Maybe it is. I don't know. I have my opinion. Every single one of you will have your opinion. And I'm not going to tell you that you're a bigot for having it, unlike certain other people. Anyway.
And opinion is one thing, but having, and I totally agree with what's been said around the room here today. Appreciate where you're coming from, and absolutely where you're coming from as well. Bottom line is, I think what's happened is over the last 100 years, especially the last 100 years, moving away from our basic build up as humans, accepting you're a female, another male. The biggest problem I've found in experiencing in society in general over the last 100 years, if you actually look at it and break it down, you realise that us men came from the farms, and we literally moved into the Industrial Revolution. And the Industrial Revolution now, and our education system is still geared for that. But it hasn't moved. And now we've moved into this technological age that us men have forgotten our role, and women have forgotten their role in society as basic humans. We are put on this earth for one thing: strip all this away from us. What are we here to do? Procreate and raise families. The bottom line: strip the cars, the phones, internet, a whole lot away from it, and basically look at what we're here to do: procreate, really, and bring up the next generation to be better. What have we done? We've got all confused with how fast it's moving, and we've forgotten our role. And the laws of the nations around the world, I can only talk for Australia, they're so dated.
Yep.
They're so out of date and not in contact with what's going on, with what's happening in the next generation. That as we were saying earlier on, our education system, our kids are growing up. I mean, I grew up, and I'm sure because I'm in my 40s, I grew up with men as role models in the school. Today, have a look around how many male teachers there are. They're growing up and they're not seeing men as being men, and girls growing up with a female and a male role model in the family, with the separation of what's going on, creating another epidemic. And this is the biggest problem that we've got to see. We can't fight each other. We've got to come together and realise, basically, bottom line is, we need to acknowledge that we are a man and they are a female, but we need to come together and forget the rest of what's going on in the real world and getting caught up with capitalism and patriotism and all this sort of stuff, because really that's garbage and belongs in the bin, really, when it comes down to it. That's how I see it. But the laws in society are creating such a bigger problem that they're rolling into the next generation, creating more and more problems, and it's snowballing. It's not going to get smaller, it's going to get bigger. That's all I can say.
You want to say something to that, or?
No, it's quite interesting listening to. Sorry.
Okay.
Anything to add to it?
I'd like to follow on a bit from what was said there. I think we need a new direction, a new discovery, something like the Hills Hoist. And what I'd like to do is do away with sex, disempower sex, and demystify it. to and fro between the sexes. I mean, you just got to look at the news every week. This week, the Navy, the American Navy, has been put in danger in America, presumably just because of a few women who have got some talents to transact. And every week there's a big executive, a big media personality gets in trouble with putting his hand under a skirt or something. You know, and it's not necessarily sex, biological point of view. Sex is for increasing the variation in the species for survival. It's not about pleasure, so let's do away with it.
Okay. Do we have another question?
Thank you very much.
What motivated you to put this on? I'm curious.
Well, first of all, like I said, Leonard was the original person to try to put this on. I've had experiences like these in the past. When I went through school, like I said, I was raised a Jehovah's Witness, so I was not allowed to be sexual. And because of this, throughout a lot of my childhood life, about 80% of my friends were girls, women. So I got along with them so well because I could only emotionally relate to them because I wasn't allowed to be sexual because that's bad and it's dirty and you're not allowed to do that. Oh yeah.
So you were in a friend zone?
Well, I was in a forced friend zone. I was in a friend zone that I put myself into because I could, like I said, I could not be sexual. But as I got older, I saw things change. And because I was in the support unit of my school, I was around children who were bullied quite a lot, and I was one of them. And now eventually I got past part of my Jehovah's Witness training and decided that, you know, the best way to deal with a bully is to punch him directly in the freaking face. And you know what? It worked fucking fantastically. It worked so well that I did it for every single bully until one day it didn't work. It made things worse. And what was the only difference? There was one difference between this bully and everyone else. It was a she. My life went to hell for the next 3 months. She was attempting to bully a kid in an electric wheelchair who could barely move his neck, let alone defend himself. And I was the evil one for standing up and punching this woman who was, by the way, 3 times my body weight in the face. So yeah, I admit that was a stupid mistake, but it is a stupid mistake that a lot of teenagers make to solve their problems with violence. And I'm not saying that what I did is right, not saying that, but it's not uncommon for teenagers to solve their problems with physical confrontation. So that was the first thing that really got my self thinking as to what's going on here. I've come to this idea as to how to solve this problem of bullying. I've done it, and every time it's worked. What's the difference? And I could only come up to one thing, and that is, okay, you're not allowed to hit a woman. Fine then. But I've been hit multiple times by women throughout my life. I've been sexually assaulted by women multiple times throughout my life. I was sitting in a bar once and a woman just sat on my leg, looked at me and asked me to rate her out of 10. And when I gave her a 7, she hit me in the head. That was lovely. What was I going to do? I knew at that point, I better not treat her equally. This is a bad idea. You know, so I felt completely helpless in that situation. And so seeing differences there were the things that made me get into this kind of movement. But I'm not going to say everything's just one way. I'm not going to say that women are just privileged and that's all they get, and men are oppressed. I don't believe men are oppressed. If you have lived your entire life in a first world country, you do not know what oppression looks like. Period. Unless you're like, I don't know, been in jail all your life, or locked up in a basement, or in some cases.
I just want to challenge you. Have you got children?
No.
Have you lost those children?
No.
Have you had assets, enormous assets? Have you lost all those assets?
No. No, I have not.
Would it be possible to call that repression by the system?
I would. The problem is you get into this realm of definitions, and when most people see oppression, they think of something like slavery. They think they conjure up something really big in their head, and so I've learned to just avoid the word because everyone has their own idea of what it is.
In America, fathers, there's a kid who was raped by a woman.
Yes, and he's been forced to pay child support. I know. Yes.
Now, if he chooses not to work,
he will be put into jail.
he will be put in jail.
Yeah, outside of specific
So
circumstances.
he's forced to work
Yeah.
for this woman.
Yeah.
Forced to work to earn money
Yes.
for this woman.
Yes. Yes.
Doesn't that sound a little bit like slavery?
Yes, it does. Here's the thing: all generalizations are false. So when I say oppression doesn't exist,
68% statistics are made up.
oh, whatever you want. Yes, there are specific circumstances.
Yeah.
Exactly, but
But that is a type of slavery.
Oh, yeah.
This isn't something I've just pulled out of the air.
No, I know.
I've given this a fair bit of thought.
I know.
These people can be put in jail. So imagine that you haven't got the money to pay for your kids. So what do? These guys don't even get the right to a lawyer because it's not considered a criminal case, it's a civil case. So a judge can just decide to put them in jail. They don't have a right to a lawyer. They're in jail where they accumulate more debt. And
Is that the case in Australia as well?
Yes, it can be. Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, it can be.
So it is the case in
First
Australia.
world country, that's what I call oppression.
Yeah.
The way I usually state that is I say it outside of certain specific
Yeah.
circumstances.
I tried to say that by giving some specific circumstances, but yes.
I think sometimes it's dangerous to look at absolutes, which is my country versus your country or whatever. It actually, from a psychologist's perspective, your level of happiness, for want of a better way of putting it, is the difference between your expectation, wherever that expectation is, and your reality. Now, if your expectation exceeds your reality, you are unhappy. Okay? But imagine my reality is here, living in Sydney, and my expectation is that I have a much better life than I have now. I'm unhappy. Yet you take someone from the third world who every day is being kept in a cage and beaten, and suddenly you put him into my life. Their expectation is down there, but the reality is the same as mine. Yet I'm unhappy and they're happy. And actually, it's quite an interesting one. So you can be so unhappy in a privileged society that you end up committing suicide. Because your expectation is, I'm going to grow up, I'm going to be educated, I'll have a good job, I'll buy this house with a white picket fence, and I'll have 3 children and a wonderful wife, and then it's all taken away in an instant. And you can be in jail. And you think, how the hell did that happen? And so, trust me, that disparity becomes very large very quickly. So yes, we are privileged in the West, but you can lose so much so quickly that you cannot cope with that change.
No, yeah.
And people kill themselves.
Yeah.
Sadly.
All right. Go for it.
So I'm trying to think through everything. Why? How do we get to where we are? Like, okay, I agree there's men have issues and women have issues.
Yes.
Why are the men's issues not? How did it come about? I think you said 2 things. The politicians of the votes and the money. Is that, like Erin Pizzi was saying, is it really just the money and the votes? Is that how?
There's also an empathy gap as well.
I think there's a whole range of factors, and in my younger, more activist years, I thought there was this massive conspiracy. All right. I no longer believe that. Okay, I believe there's an unholy alliance of too many different types of people who gain from it being the way it is. So I don't think anyone gets together and plans it, but if solicitors can make a lot of money out of it, and it happens to suit half the population that they have more rights, for example, then the smaller group, which might be men in this case, might not be able to overcome that very easily without convincing the other half. I'm not suggesting it's necessarily that way, but I think things happen just the way they do. And it happens to suit too many people to leave it that way. I also think there's, again, I work in psychology during the day, there's an inherent stubbornness in people to change. I think, people talk about people don't like change. Part of that is called safety. Okay, we've evolved as human beings. Sorry, let me put it another way. We're the dominant animal species on this planet, typically for three things. Okay, we've got an opposing thumb and finger, which means we can use tools. We've got enough smarts and intelligence to work out a set of rules, which says if I pick up that rock and smash it against his head, he dies and I can eat him. Okay, so we're smart enough to work out rules. And the third thing is we have a voice, so we can convey that rule to another person. But one of the things you do in life is that you learn, if I do this, it's bad. So if I stick my hand in a fire, it hurts like hell, so I'm not going to do it again. So I've learnt the pattern. So we once we learn a pattern that isn't too dangerous and keeps us relatively safe, we don't like moving away from it. So there is this inherent resistance in humanity to changing. And so unfortunately, we have slowly drifted because it suits a lot of people in a particular direction, but it's very hard to pull it back. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort by a lot of people over a lot of time to move it back to where it needs to be, which is a bit more of an equitable system.
Go for it.
Yep. I'm going to stand up.
Oh, yeah,
if
there you go.
If that's okay, but only because I wanted to address what you said, first of all, earlier, about women in the men's movement. And, I mean, I agree with you, like, in philosophy I agree with you that we need to work together, and we do need more female voices. But quite a few in the room know that as a very strong female voice in the movement, I've come under enormous attack, life-changing, vicious attack. And so it's not that easy. But what I wanted to say was, over the course of particularly the last 7 or 8 months, I've had a lot of interaction with probably what they would probably describe them. They identify as feminists. They would probably fit more into the second wave feminist, maybe early third wave feminist movement, but they're more the traditional type of feminist. And when I talk to them about men's issues, like coming in from not coming in to talk about activism, I'm meeting them in other circles, in other professional circles, mediators, psychologists, counsellors, more in a professional sphere. And when they hear my version of what's happening to men and men's issues, they actually are very disturbed by it when they do hear the stories. So they are actually very empathetic towards it, but they're still stuck, as Cassie J was, in this indoctrinated thinking and changing. And it's very hard for them to. They don't need to go down the rabbit hole, and I don't believe that they need to change their ideology just to accept men's issues. I think that it's a matter of meeting somewhere in the middle. And the conversations that I've had are actually really heartening. But it's how do we get from it's like we need to silence the extreme opinions on either end of the spectrum. So both in feminism and in men's rights. I mean, we can't do that, right? So we can't quiet that down. So we need
the ones who attract most of the attention.
We need the middle voice to become so much more centred and so much more balanced in order to be able to create that way. And we really need to change the narrative and the dialogue and the way we interact. And men can't sit back and say, well, I demand change and this is the way it's going to be, in the same way that women have done that, because we're just going to be at loggerheads. 100%. So we need to come in to a place that is slightly more balanced, a lot more balanced, and respecting of each other if we're going to have those conversations. Because when I've had those conversations, they're very powerful and they work. Yeah. But
what would you suggest from your experience?
That, pretty much.
No. I agree with you. That was brilliant. But where do you start? Because certain people.
Well, for a start, sorry, I'm going to rip into you. I'm used to it. Because making polarising statements doesn't help anybody. So, I mean, you actually, in what you said, even though what you believe is what a lot of other people believe about, certain types of masculinity, that doesn't fit a whole lot of other men, right? I
spoke generally. I didn't speak specifically.
Well,
I gave one example.
No, what you said was that
in
men that weren't strongly masculine weren't attracted to women. Well, that's actually not true, right? And
not to you.
Well, no, actually, I'm not going to get into my dating preferences or relationship preferences. But I'm telling you, from speaking to a broad range of men, that not all men are naturally dominant and strong and controlling and
I never said
all of
controlling.
those things.
I'm sorry, I didn't
You
say
didn't
that
say
word.
controlling. I did.
I said leading, making decisions. I didn't say controlling.
Okay, all right. So not all men are naturally inclined that way. So what I'm saying to you though is that you can't. I don't. You ask me what I think the answers are. I think staying away from polarising statements about either gender is going to help us. We have to come back more to the
I think you're right in that, except for when there are facts involved.
When there's facts involved, there's facts involved.
Exactly.
I mean, we're talking about
Yeah,
facts,
yeah.
but when
It
I mean,
is a
there's nothing
tricky one
factual in
because
that.
he's got a classic 1950s David Data. Men should be in this particular mindset, and men should lead and direct and make decisions and take charge.
I've got a video to you.
Listen,
Follow.
hello.
It's
Let
not
me
follow.
finish. Shut up. and women, he argues, want that. Otherwise,
Majority of women, not all. I agree with that.
Well, here's the thing, though. I mean, yes and no. Everyone's an individual. Every person is their own individual. But we all know that arsehole who gets way luckier than we do. I certainly know a couple of them. But that doesn't say anything about the morality of the situation, or whether I'm capable of acting that way, or whether or not I should act that way. Or want to. Yes.
I just wanted to address this gentleman who said, where do we start? And getting back to what Jasmine was saying, one of the most powerful experiences happened, and I'm nowhere near as vocal as Jasmine because I have to hide for a while. I stick my head out, I say a few provocative things, I get called a bitch or then I pull back a bit, and then when I feel brave again, I get back out there, where Jazz puts herself out there all the time regardless. And I'll tell you an example. I grew up, I'm the youngest of 5 children, I've got a brother and I've got 4 sisters. My mother was the traditional at home, my dad had a company, all that sort of thing. Where it was different for us is that we absolutely saw our parents in traditional roles. But one of the most profound things happened to me when I was 14 years old, and I said to my mum something, and she said something about Dad, and I went, oh, Dad, and she said to me, you have no idea of the pressure on that man to bring money home to this house, to put food on our table. And I went, oh, and that came out of my mother's mouth.
Mm-hmm.
I learned everything I know, most of what I know, from seeing my parents interact with each other and the respect that they have for one another. So when I was married to my husband, and when I'm with my man now, I say to him, thank you. Thank you for going out and providing for my children. Even though I'm not together with my ex-husband, I say to him, thank you for providing for our children. And that's where we need to start. If we want our future, our children, we need to start. And it's really hard when you got someone lobbing shit at you. When I broke up with my ex-husband, and he hated me, I hated him for a while, but we kept our friggin' mouths shut. And when my children were saying, I asked him to leave, and he did. And the children were like, oh, Dad left. And I said, because I asked him to. And this is between you and your dad and I and all that. And I know it's hard because it takes 2 people to play that game. But what I was saying is that it starts with the conversations around the table, and it starts with what we're telling our children. Tell your daughters and your sons your story. Tell them about your life. I know everything there is to know about my mother. And what I do know about my dad, I heard it from my mother. Right? So tell it yourself. Tell your kids your story. Tell them it's hard to go to work every day. Tell them it's hard work to be a dad. Tell them when you leave them, you miss them. Tell them all that stuff that kids want to hear that they get from their mum. So that when they grow up and they become parents, they pass that same story on. And then maybe in 100 or 200 years' time, we might be a completely different society.
I don't want to sound as if I'm challenging you.
But I just will share one other thing. My ex-brother-in-law is a bullhead. He's a twin of my ex-husband, and you couldn't get 2 more different people. My ex-husband's a teacher, he's a wonderful man. His brother is just like, wow. And he's sitting there at the table, and I wasn't there because we were divorced, and my son was sitting there, and his cousin's 18 years old, so the sons of the 2. my ex-brother-in-law gets up. He's never had anything to do with domestic violence. He's not a perpetrator. He's never been a victim or whatever. He gets up and he spits out, "Women get a bad deal, rah, rah, rah." What? He indoctrinated what society's telling him.
Yep.
His 18-year-old son turns around and says to him, and he respects his 18-year-old son because he's a god on the rugby field, and he said, "Actually, you know what, Dad?" He said, 1 in 3 victims of domestic violence are males. He goes, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah," and he goes, "And blah, blah, blah." Do you know how he learned that? Because I keep posting that shit. I don't think anyone listens, but he did.
Yeah.
And his own father went, "Really?" And he goes, "I did not know that." It's like, so that it's sometimes the little things that you don't think are ever going to germinate. And then one day it does, and you go, "Oh."
What I wanted to communicate, particularly to your point, was the difficulty being a man in today's society. I'm not into, let's go back to the 1850s idea of what masculinity is, but you see, I've had to give up my power in the public sphere, my intellectual power, my financial power. I'm equal, there's not much inequality in that sphere. There are places. However, I haven't been given the power in emotions, in reproductions, in sex. The women I relate to hang on to that power like blazes, and their toolkit is pretty fucked. They haven't. I went through this 30 years ago.
Why do you say it's fun?
Because women have an emotional toolbox, which is big, and a lot of the tools in it don't work. But after a lot of work on myself, I've only got a little toolbox. But the tools are great.
But I mean, that's a bigger social problem. That affects men and women. That people don't do their own self work in order to.
What I wanted to say was that as a man, I've got to go out and deal with getting ripped off every day and fighting, killing the beast, and then I've got to come home and say, I really struggled. I'm terrified. I'm really sad. I've got to go into my emotional pain. I don't want to go to work tomorrow.
There's nothing
so
wrong
the
with
lucidity, the lucidity of being able to do both. Be the, what's that guy you want me to be? Listen, I'll make the decision, woman. Just get dressed. I'll take it.
I didn't say that. You misquoted. I said leading and making decisions. I didn't say controlling. I'm happy to be quoted.
Listen,
I want you to be my woman.
You just
I
gave
want to
the
lead
exact
you.
example that you gave.
And I want to be vulnerable too, so that
Yeah,
you can
I
see
am.
how.
You have a question?
I am. Inside.
Just for now. Okay, well, we're going to go to audio anyway.
Just to wrap up, I respect everyone in this room. We're all equal. Just going back to what I was saying earlier on. We've forgotten our role as men and women in this world as we've progressed. And absolutely right. The truth will set you free. Totally agree with everything that was said here in respect to one side, which is the female, they have their, men have the other side, and the truth lies in the middle. If we can come together and actually acknowledge both sets of pains and challenges, this world, and put things, implement them in, forget the law, and actually go right back to our basic human DNA makeup, and actually accept them, the truth will set you free.
Well, thank you. Does anyone else have another question? All right, I'll go on a bit of a ramble then, if nobody has a question. I think one of the things people are going to need to think about and solve is the different narratives that men and women are taught. What are the narratives that men and boys hear about sex when it happens to them? Well, they hear you're lucky. You're always lucky. It doesn't matter if you're a 14-year-old boy who's been groomed by a 40-year-old teacher, you're still lucky. You're always lucky if you've had sex with a woman. That is the narrative you will hear from everybody. What's the narrative that women hear? It's almost the opposite. Did he jump through enough hoops? Well, if he didn't, then you are a slut, and therefore you are devalued. Does he yell at you? If so, that's domestic violence. Don't you know that's domestic violence? What if he sits the wrong way? That's annoying. That's also domestic violence. What if he interrupts you? Well, that's domestic violence too. So, what women hear about men and what men hear about women is part of a huge problem that we need to fix. And we need to step back and say, yes, Men can be toxic, women can be toxic, and sometimes when you have sex it can be lucky and sometimes not so much. And there you go, that's my ramble. If anyone else wants to say something or ask a question, go for it. Otherwise I'm just going to sit down and, or we could all go, I suppose, and have pizza or whatever. Oh yeah! Also, the International Conference for Men's Issues, which the topic is Building Bridges Between Men and Women. That is the topic. Picked far before this talk or movie, whatever. Anyway, that's on June the 8th to the 12th in the Gold Coast. I think tickets are like $250 American, which is a bit pricey, I know.
It's a 3-day event, isn't it?
It's a 3-day event. I think it includes some food. I'm not entirely sure. Yes, it's on the Queen's birthday.
Oh, okay.
It's on the Queen's birthday long weekend. Yeah, and
ICMI.info is the website.
and also I'd very much appreciate it if you followed my Facebook page, Men's Rights Australia, or Equality for Men on Meetup. Men's Rights Australia. I run Men's Rights Sydney. I am on one side of this debate, I'll admit, but I try to be neutral, as does my friend who sat down.
Cassie J will be there, right? And
Cassie J will be there. Erin Pizzi will be there. God, I love Erin Pizzi. If she was 80 years younger. I mean, yeah. All right. Well, I would suggest everyone get going, and hopefully you'll eat pizza because pizza's delicious, and have a lovely day.
Thanks, guys. Very much.
Well, that is it for the Q&A and discussion. I hope you enjoyed listening, and chat to you later.